Good evening and welcome to the regular City Council meeting for the City of St. Peter, Minnesota. It's Monday, August 26th, 2024. At 7 p.m. we are called to order. Would all please rise for the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We've all received a copy of the packet. Are there any revisions or corrections to the packet? Or the agenda, rather? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor of approval say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda is approved. Next up, approval of the minutes. The minutes appear on pages 5 through 9 of the packet. Are there any revisions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes as distributed?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor of approval say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. We have on page 10 instructions for public hearings, the process and procedures. We have 3 public hearings tonight. Generally, the public hearings are conducted in the following manner. There's a staff presentation, there's time for an applicant's presentation, if any, and then time for public comment. So the first public hearing tonight will be called to order at 7:02 p.m., and that is a public hearing on the creation of tax increment financing district number 1-26.
Madam Mayor and members, as you are aware, information is included in your packet. I will introduce Mike Bubani. Mike is here in place of Shannon. Shannon is engaged in another activity, so he sent the A-team. So we really want to thank him for that. And you guys can all tell Shannon that sometimes when you see him. But Mike's here to make sure that I don't miss anything. But the hearing is really scheduled to provide for public input. And the creation of this district really has about 7 or 8 points that I think are important that you know about. First of all, this would be a housing district. And the location of this is in the North Industrial Park. This is a project that we typically refer to as being the Picorni project. That's why you see that afterwards. The map for this is on page 83. Give me just a moment and I'll get to page 83 here. So this is located for a housing project. I think one of the most significant issues that you know here is that this is a developer that we've worked on before, and you do have a development agreement for this project that includes the opportunity for their use of tax increment financing. This is substantially similar to other housing TIF districts that you have in place within St. Peter, and very, very similar to what is going on with this partnership group as well. As you know, as a part of the tax increment financing district, they pledged that 20% of the units, which are approximately 50 units, have to meet the 50% AMI requirement that you see in state statute and that you've adhered to. I'd also mention that based on the development agreement, this group has agreed to provide for 5 units that will accept federal housing assistance. So that could come in a few forms, but usually we hear about this and talk about it in St. Peter as being they'll accept a Section 8 voucher as well as a part of this project. And that's something that we really haven't done before, but we've worked with this group and they're looking at that. I think one of the other important issues is that we are going to do a 90-10 split, again, similar to what you've seen with other districts. And that district will last about $1 million, $1.01 million, or 12 years, whichever comes first. And that's not unusual. This is a pay-as-you-go district, and we talked about what that means previously. We do have action items later on your agenda, and really there are 2 action items. There are 2 resolutions related to this. The first is to take this parcel out of a previously existing tax increment financing district for the North Industrial Park. And so once that's cleaned up, then we can establish the new district, which is 1-26. And so if you're wondering why there's 2 resolutions, there's 2 resolutions, and that's the basis for that. I also mentioned that the TIF development agreement, and we've talked about this in the past as well, we have kind of two development agreements. One is the development agreement that we enter with the developer that says they're going to build the building thus and so and how it is put together. The other is drawn up by your legal counsel from what used to be called Briggs & Morgan, now is called Taft. Mary Epple drafts a TIF development agreement that outlines all the specifics related to the financing and how all that works together. So I'd mention that as well. Again, 2 action items later in your agenda. I don't know, Mike, did I cover most of it? Did I hit all the high points?
Yes, you did. I do have a couple of extra comments. You know, one of the things I struggle with a council that I've never met with before is how deep to get into the weeds. You know, how comfortable are you? I don't want to tell you things you already know. It sounds like you're all grizzled veterans, so we'll avoid getting into some of the granular detail. I'll just point out that as you read through the documents, sometimes folks will read stuff in the TIF plan itself and say, well, gosh, that's not exactly what we're agreeing to do. And what I would mention is that the TIF plan is just an authority document. What you can do whatever is stated in the TIF plan. Doesn't mean you will. It just gives you the authority to do things. So one thing you'll notice is that Shannon has built in a budget based on not just this first building of 50, but potentially a second building as well. And by including that potential second phase now and creating an extra large budget, so Todd had mentioned $1 million, and this thing might generate 4.3 million gross over the full 26 years if you went that long for any reason. We put that in there to avoid the need for a modification later. So in the consultant world, one of our little tricks is to put together a TIF plan and a budget that's right down to the nub, so that if anything else happens, by God, you got to give us a call and we got to go through and do a modification, which is just time and expense that you don't need to take on. So Shannon built in, hopefully, quite a bit of extra budget in there that you won't need to do this thing, and he's got the full life of the TIF district. So while it's a 12-year contract, it's a 26 potential collection. So if phase 2 comes along, you'll have that ability to just approve a contract at that time. As far as the agreement goes, Todd had mentioned it's pay-as-you-go. Just if you're wondering, whenever we're using property taxes as a tool for a subsidy, it means somebody has to borrow money today because property taxes are collected over time. And what we always want to do is have the developer be the one that takes on the risk. That's what you're doing here. So not only if we go the full 12 years and we haven't fully repaid the $1 million, you're not on the hook to pay the difference. If they don't pay their taxes, any reason whatsoever, if money doesn't come in, money doesn't go out. So it's financially risk-free to the city. It's the best way to do these deals. And then in the agreement itself, there are some added protections in there. The standard one is indemnification. So, you know, the example I always give is imagine some guy's up on a ladder building this thing and they fall off and they hurt themselves. And then they sue the city because if you hadn't provided TIF assistance, they wouldn't have been on that ladder in the first place. Well, the developer's taking on the liability for that through the indemnification. And another major point that I like to always mention is that in the contract itself is that, you know, the developer's free to sell the project to somebody else later on, but if they want to keep the contract alive, they have to come to you first and get approval from that. So they can't just sell it and then you would be able to look at the new potential owner and decide, are they going to maintain the obligations that are in this contract? Do they have the financial wherewithal? Are they a good business partner? You'd have the opportunity at that time to approve or disapprove. So I guess with that, I'll stop and take questions.
To add before we jump into questions?
I don't have anything else to add. Certainly it's appropriate if the council has questions, but you do have this as an action item later, and the goal of the hearing is to provide opportunity for public input.
Sure. Well, let's jump into the public, thank you very much, Mike.
You're welcome.
Let's jump into the public comment. Are there any members of the audience right now who'd like to address the council on this matter? Hearing none, we will close this public hearing at 7:09, and we will move into our next public hearing, which is a public hearing on Klein Street improvements, and we'll open that at 7:09.
Mayor members, that's me again. There's information included in your packet. That information really starts on page about 116. As you're aware, this is related to a development for a DOT truck station. The council previously took action on this to authorize bids. This is also located in the North Industrial Park, and it's that extension of Klein, really north of Mason for about 1,500 or 1,800 feet. Again, you have a development agreement that has been agreed to by the state of Minnesota DOT. And this is really a belt and suspenders approach to have the hearing because they've already agreed to pay their share of the assessments. They're aware of what the bids are. Communication with DOT is always good, and they understand what's going on here. So it does provide for the assessment for them to pay half of the street and the utilities that go in Klein Street. The action really follows Minnesota State Statute 429 for assessments, and as you'll see later in the meeting, there is a resolution to provide for authorizing this to move forward. And so, again, Madam Mayor, happy to answer any questions, and since this is a hearing, it's appropriate for public input.
Sure. Are there any questions for Todd? Hearing nothing at this time, we will jump into public comment. Are there any members of the audience who'd like to address the council on this matter? Hearing no one, we will close this hearing at 7:11 p.m. and we will move on to our final public hearing on Cullen Street improvements. We'll open the hearing at 7:11.
Mayor members, that's me again. You'll see this included in your packet. Really, the information starts on approximately page 120 or 121. This is for work that you've been intimately familiar with for a number of months related to housing development on what I would call the west and more towards north end of the Traverse Green subdivision. As you know, the goal here has been to develop additional residential lots that are in excess of 10,000 square feet. This hearing, which provides for public input, is really addressing action later in your meeting, and that action is to pass a resolution ordering the improvements. In addition to that, the bids have been received, and so Pete will talk a little bit later and look potentially for your action to approve the bids and move this project forward. And certainly we have some more to talk about related to that. But the nature of the hearing here is really to provide opportunity for public input and put the council in a position to order the improvement, finding that it's feasible, all of those things that are a part of this process.
Thanks, Todd. Any members of the audience like to address the council on this matter? Hearing none, we will close this public hearing at 7:12 p.m. All of these items, as Todd already mentioned, will come up again under new business. Moving on, we now have time on our agenda, as we do at every meeting, for visitor comments. Is there any member of the audience who'd like to address the council on any agenda item? Hearing none, we also have time for general comments. Is there any member of the audience who'd like to address the council on any matter whatsoever? Hearing none, we will move on to the approval of the consent agenda. The consent agenda begins on page 11 and concludes with the resolution on page 32. The resolution includes the following employee appointments: Beth Ramhilt, Megan Doby, Kyle O'Connell, Dan Hahn, and Charity Stewart. Their positions and wages are listed within the packet. The following licenses: a temporary gambling license for Helping Minnesota Heroes and a temporary on-sale liquor license for St. Peter Ambassadors. Locations and dates are listed within the packet, and the schedule of disbursements for August 7th, 2024 through August 21st, 2024. Is there any discussion of any item on the consent agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Johnson?
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis?
Aye.
Councilmember Ramp?
Aye.
Councilmember Sharstrom?
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos?
Aye.
Mayor Noel?
Aye. The resolution is approved. We have no items of unfinished business tonight. Our first item of new business is a job description for a wastewater laboratory technician, and Pete is here to talk to us about that. Thanks, Pete.
Madam Mayor and City Council, as you're aware, we have 6 employees within our wastewater division. One of those employees has left employment with us, with the primary duties of that person was to operate the laboratory. During the course of our advertising, the last couple of times this position has been open, we've had some wastewater requirements in the job description that have been one of the reasons we feel that people aren't applying for the position. So since this job actually works quite a bit in the laboratory side and working with our human resources department, we came up with a job description that better fits the duties and responsibilities of this position. I know you talked about this at workshop last week, and if approved, the job description, we will create a wage scale that correlates to the points and the duties as described in the job description. And with your blessing, we would get advertisements out and try to solicit people for this position.
All right, questions for Pete? It was good to hear from Don and Curtis about this position last week. I feel like it's a really sensible change and hopefully will help you recruit the right candidate.
Right.
All right, hearing no discussion. The resolution adopting an updated laboratory technician position description is on page 38 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve? Oh. We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Pettis?
Aye.
Councilmember Ram?
Aye.
Councilmember Sharpstrom?
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos?
Aye.
Mayor Noel?
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson?
Aye.
Resolution is approved.
Thank you,
very
Pete.
much, Pete. Our next item of new business is a 2023 audit review and approval.
And members, Jim Eichten is here, as he has been over the last, I'm only going to say a few years, Jim. We won't go
Okay.
back that far, but a
Thank
few
you.
years. Many of you recognize Jim, and his firm, MMKR, does your audit. And so Jim is here to provide the findings of that audit.
All right. Well, thanks. Again, my name is Jim Eichten. I'm with MMKR CPAs, auditor for the city. Here this evening to provide a presentation on the audit results for the year ended December 31st, 2023 audit. It is the role of the auditor to provide an opinion on the city's financial statement. It is a requirement in state law that the city issue an annual financial statement. That particular financial statement is required to be submitted to the Office of the State Auditor on an annual basis. You're also required to submit to the federal government if you were to receive more than $750,000 of federal revenue on an annual basis, which did actually occur this year. So we'll be submitting to both agencies once approved by council. As part of the audit process, we're required to do a number of things, including testing your internal control systems specifically over financial reporting, your compliance with laws and regulations that relate to financial reporting as part of the audit process. We're also required to audit your compliance with Minnesota laws and regulations. The Office of the State Auditor issues a list of the laws that pertain to city government that they want us to test. They do change the list annually based on their own knowledge and expertise on their end, that they're things that they're seeing that they want us to look at. As I referenced, we also then this year, because you received more than you spent more than $750,000. You haven't quite received all the reimbursements yet, but you spent more than $750,000 of federal awards, which triggered what we call a single audit of federal awards. In that situation, we issue opinions on that schedule, as well as our testing of the major program, which in this case was a highway safety grant, or highway planning grant, I guess you could say. And then we issue opinion again on the compliance with various laws and regulations as it relates to that particular grant, which are significantly different than a regular audit, given the federal grant compliance that pertain to those expenditures. So we issue an audit report as well as a management report as part of this process. In that particular document, we do summarize the audit results for the year. First and more foremost, I was able to issue an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. It was the opinion you were looking for. It's a clean opinion as it relates to that. It's important to know as a council that as part of your audit report, we are required to incorporate the financial results of both the Rivers Edge Hospital and Clinic, as well as the Housing Redevelopment Authority. Both of those organizations are audited by other auditors, and we incorporate their audit results into your document, which creates a bit of complexity, as you might understand, but certainly has been the case for as long as I've been the auditor. So in my report, we also issue findings as part of this audit. The first finding that you see up on the PowerPoint there is we had a number of adjustments that occurred as part of the audit process this year. And I would describe them as adjustments in this manner. Anytime an auditor finds an adjustment that is something that we noticed versus the administration noticing it, it can be defined as a financial statement adjustment. I talked to Todd and Sally before this meeting just to kind of clarify this a bit. You know, there's a fine line here in our auditing process between determining exactly what would be defined as assistance in the audit process or an adjustment. And this year, we spent quite a bit of time validating that and making sure we understood what responsibilities of us as auditors and what is the responsibility of management. And we spent some time as part of the financial statement process in segregating those out and determine exactly what was an adjustment and what was not. And as we look to next year, and I say this as an important element of any particular audit, is that, well, what is the corrective action plan as it relates to your audit results? What are we going to do as it relates to this particular finding? So first and foremost, there was a corrective action plan incorporated into the audit results that talked about what that corrective action is going to be, and that is going to be, as talked about earlier, outlining the audit process in more clear goals and procedures. What parts of the audit process are going to be responsible by me? I'll give you an example. The county here in the state of Minnesota, counties in the state of Minnesota collect special assessments and taxes. So there's a process that you got to go through to take that data and incorporate it into the city's financial statements. Well, we do that as part of our what I would call an accounting assistance process. Well, some cities hire us to do that and some don't. So you've hired us to assist with that process. So there's really no financial statement adjustment there because you've asked us to assist in that process. In other areas, you haven't asked us to assist, but we found other adjustments. So you can tell that there's a fine line difference between the two. And we're going to work towards next year in terms of outlining exactly what those differences are so that we can work towards not having a financial statement adjustment next year. So I talked to Todd and Sally about that earlier at about 6 o'clock and how we're going to work towards that corrective action plan moving forward. The second finding you see up there relates to segregation of duties. So the city's finance staff is not to the level or the numbers that you would have or even expect to have perfect segregation of duties within your control systems. We've had that finding this year. It's been in place for any number of years. Every city that we work that is of this size has that particular, I'll call it, reportable item. You need to understand as a council that there's no concerns there. There's no real corrective action. We rely and you rely on other controls to overcome that particular element. So no real concerns there. Two other findings we had in the Minnesota Legal Compliance Audit, one on collateral. All bank deposits in the state of Minnesota that are at a governmental entity are required to be collateralized to the tune of 110% of your deposits that exceed FDIC coverage. So one of the banks, the collateral wasn't sufficient as of the end of the year. What it typically relates to, and it is again in your case, is there was a deposit at the, right at the end of the year that significant deposit goes in, the collateral doesn't get adjusted quick enough, and also you're under collateralized. Again, it's not sufficient. It's not a significant finding, but it is a finding nonetheless. It is just something that the bank working with the city needs to monitor a little closer, and that's what the corrective action states. The other finding relates to withholding affidavits. Anytime that you work with a contractor in a construction project, you're required to get a withholding affidavit, basically confirming that they've paid all of their withholdings, they've paid their vendors, they've paid their subcontractors. And you do that before you make final payment. Well, in this particular situation, the final payment went out 2 to 3 days before the withholding affidavit came in. So, yep, you didn't get it on time, but you did have it, when we looked and it was available. So again, the corrective action plan there is, let's make sure we have that before we make that final payment. So the last finding we have specifically relates to the single audit of federal awards. We noted some completeness issues in the schedule of federal awards, mainly in the reporting of expenditures. When you look at that particular grant, there were more expenditures that we identified in terms of the timing of payments and timing of invoices coming in and the reporting of that particular item that was labeled as a finding. And again, the corrective action plan there is to just make sure we're cutting that off correctly and making sure that those expenditures cutoffs are appropriately reported, specifically for those federal grants. So moving forward, it is important to note that we did follow up on the 2 findings from last year that are no longer reported. I always say this as part of an audit presentation of this nature. Audits come with findings. That's why we're here. That's why I'm here doing this. But the most important part is, are we going to correct them? And how are we going to correct them? And I point to that bullet point up there, the 4th bullet point, and said, yeah, 2 findings that I stated last year aren't findings this year. Why? Because corrective actions worked. Very important. Moving on, I think, to the next slide, really getting into the other part of an audit, which is financial results. And I'll try to go through this quickly. I think certainly the financial results of the city are very positive for the year ended December 31st, 2023. Really, it starts with market values. When we look at your overall, starting financial results, you can see there the market values of the city have grown significantly over time. It continues to even accelerate at a faster pace than we're even seeing in other cities around the state. So that's a real positive. If you look at this particular next graph, you can see the impact on the city. This shows the average tax rate being used to develop taxes for individual residents, and that average tax rate has gone down in 2023, specifically related to that market value. It's also impacting the county and the school, but certainly that average tax rate is a plus for taxpayers when you see that decline. But that being said, if you, and I'll show this actually later, I don't think it's this graph, but yeah, this is here. You can see that this is a graph that shows governmental funds revenues on a per capita basis. This is showing the city collects $1,183 per resident in revenues in 2023. And you can see, even though that property tax rate went down significantly, you actually generated more property taxes, which is really a mathematical formula driving from those market values. So really increasing property taxes while decreasing property tax rates is a plus for your city for sure. One thing to point out, just a disclaimer here, the statewide data is 2021. That was the most recent data available when we published this report. The state auditor's office publishes that data, and they're significantly behind on publishing information. So we've compared it from a few years ago. Hopefully next year we'll have good and better comparable data. Other things that stand out to me is the intergovernmental revenue line there. You can see that that particular line has gone up significantly in 2023 as well as 2022 as the city continues to utilize federal and state dollars for various projects. There's a new public safety aid that came from the state. That's part of that as well. Certainly that's a plus when it comes to city government in St. Peter nonetheless. This graph is the opposite when it comes to your spending, expenditures on a per capita basis. The city spends $2,042 per resident in 2023. Most of that increase, as you can see, is in capital. Capital outlay and construction projects are increasing. Again, part of that is federal dollars being available for those projects, state dollars. The current line has gone up modestly. It went up some, but most of that is actually in the all other category, which is in economic development loans, which ultimately will be paid back. Well, we hope they will be paid back. That's the hope. But certainly, again, helping with the city's economic development. This particular graph shows the overall funds. There's a lot of detail here. I'm not going to get into too much, but you can see the middle of that page is the general fund. The general fund balance, the equity position of the general fund improved by about $86,000. In 2023, there was a final budget that adopted that reflected a decline of about $400,000 roughly. So you can see that was pretty much a break even when it comes to fund balance. There's a lot of capital activity going on in that graph. Most of that is restricted and going to be funded with future projects. So no real concern overall there. I think the next graph does actually show the general fund in particular. This graph shows the general fund's financial position. That $4.5 million fund balance is your equity position at the end of the year. The city council is guided by a fund balance policy stating that the fund balance as a percentage of operation should be between 35 and 50% of operations. At the end of 2023, the percentage is, I don't want to misquote myself here, so I'm going to make sure I use the right percentage. 40, okay, let's make sure I got it. 48. There you go. Thank you, Sally, from the back. Yeah, so it's 48. So what that means to you is you're within certainly fund balance policy. You're actually at the high end, not the high end. You're at the appropriate end of that range. But it's good for policy making as a council. You should make sure you're staying in that range. Anytime you get above that range, there typically is actions that take place, or when you get below that range, you take action. And when you're in the range, it's a good place to be. So we do have other graphs here showing general fund revenues. Again, the things that stand out to me is that property tax line continues to grow even though you're having moderate tax rates. You saw some licensing or permits declines this past year, but not real concern there. On the expenditure side, public safety continues to be, which is I believe the next graph, Todd, continues to be a growth area in terms of cost. That is not a surprise. That's happening all over our state in terms of cost centers. That's a growth area, but certainly, again, not concerning. Just that's the way life is in our world right now. So we also have a bunch of graphs on enterprise funds. Enterprise funds are a significant portion of the city's activities. You have a lot of complexity in your city when it comes to these funds. You have an electric fund, which not every city has. As you can see, the laundry list there. Overall, the enterprise funds did show an increase in fund balance of about 89. It's actually debt position in this case, 89,000. And you can see some ups and downs there. There were some transfers that are made in these funds that are causing some of these declines. Again, not real concern, a concern on my end. One of the things I did mention in our pre-meeting tonight, the City Council has adopted a new policy when it comes to equity position in these funds. I commend the City Council for this. I stated earlier that I don't see it all that often, and so that's a plus. You're really monitoring these equity position in these funds by having this policy in place. And when I looked at that, I incorporated that into my report. The only one that stood out is the Environmental Service Fund, which is the one that probably isn't meeting that policy at this point, but certainly there are plans in place to get beyond that particular item. So very positive trend lines when it comes to these funds. My report does have 5-year graphical presentations for all of these enterprise funds. We focus on, or I do, on the green line, which is really a green line is intended to show cash flow. Are these particular funds cash flowing on an annual basis? And you can see that particular green line for the last 5 years in the this graph is above the line. The yellow line in this particular one is probably the one that stood out the most. Purchase power. You can see that particular cost, it went up. I don't even know what the number was. 16% stands out in my head. But and who you're buying purchase power from is certainly the vendors raised their costs significantly. Again, here's the water fund. You can see the green line is a plus for all 5 years. There were some rate increases in almost all of these funds that are impacting the funds, as well as consumption was significantly higher in 2023 all over government this past year, which is driving some of the revenues. I think the next one is the Environmental Service Fund. You can see, that I mentioned that one already, and you can see the green line is not going in the right direction in terms of financial results. It's not overly concerning, certainly, but you can really see why that might stand out to me as an auditor. But overall revenues and expenses, you can see even the increase over the last 2 years in the blue line has really gone significantly higher, driving that particular fund. Wastewater, certainly the green line is probably the highest of any fund in this particular set. And then I think there's one more. Do I have one more? I forget. I do not. There are more in there. If you're excited, you can read those at nighttime reading. No, the last thing I want to talk about is the outstanding debt of the city. We do present the outstanding debt in the graphical presentation here, mainly because of some of the debt obligations of the city are unique in what you have, and it comes with a lot of complexity, as I mentioned. So we put these together to show some of the comparables. So statewide, the average debt in the governmental activity runs about $1,700 per resident. You can see with some of the new debt issues this year, you're up to $1,400 per resident in governmental funds. When you look at the next graph, it shows your enterprise funds. In this particular fund, you can see the average is about $800 per resident statewide, and you're at now you're with payments and how fast those payments go down over the 4-year period, you're at $1,200. So overall, when you add them together, you're at or just slightly above the average when it comes to debt. These graphical presentations are here specifically to point that out. If you really just look at one fund, those enterprise funds, you might go, wow, you got a lot of debt in those funds. But when you add them together, they're basically at the expectation, in my opinion, for a growing city like yourself. So.
And on the previous, could you go back to the previous slide? In 2023 in particular, there was a substantial increase for St. Peter. Could that be attributed to the fire station?
Yes.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
right.
and some equipment certificates would be in there too.
I mean, like I said, it was just such a large jump.
Yeah.
compared to-
It's definitely the fire
They do a
station.
really good job of matching that revenue to
Yep.
those debt services, and so the sales tax has been a very firm,
Yep.
solid, above expectation, above projection revenue stream.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, I think I covered that. There you go. So I'm going to skip by that one. We do provide in our report some future and accounting auditing updates. The Governmental Accounting Standards Board has been very active in issuing new standards, thankfully. Going into next year, there are none. At least nothing significant, which I'm grateful for, frankly. So in summary, I was able to issue a clean opinion on the financial statements. Issued a single audit of federal awards, which is a key element of the audit success. We went through the findings. We have several findings that we'll work towards next year clearing, and staff is working towards implementing these new corrective actions. The findings from last year were eliminated, and certainly the compliance with those general fund policies in place, with the one exception that I talked about already. So overall, very positive results. And it certainly met my expectations, and with your approval tonight, this will be submitted to the state auditor and the federal government by Wednesday, I hope. So with that, I'm open for questions.
Any questions for Jim? Todd, anything to add?
The only thing that I want to mention, which I you should be really happy about. Jim mentioned this at the beginning. You know, when we went into the 2023 budget year, we anticipated, you budgeted for deficit of approximately $400,000, and we came out in the positive about $87,000. And so there's a number of things to go on, but I would say that over the last 5, 10, 15, 25 years even, related to your budgets, you are planners and you are very much on target and knowing where you're at. And so I think that's a positive outcome, and it's great that your auditor can see that and identify that as a part of this for you. So,
Well said.
Madam Mayor, the appropriate thing is to pass a resolution that's included in your packet. I think it's on page 68 or 69, accepting the audit, so Jim can hit the button and send this off to everyone. I would mention too that this is something that we put on our website, so all the documents that you were provided, what you saw in the packet for tonight is the management report, but all of this information gets put on your website, and that'll happen within the next few days or so. So if you have friends or neighbors that really want to see all the detail and everything that goes on, it is all there for them to see, that Jim's team puts together for us.
It's really well put together. If you're into audits, I recommend checking it out. But you do a great job of of making it accessible for people who don't live in the auditing world. So, are there any questions or discussion? Hearing nothing, the resolution accepting the 2023 financial statements together with the independent auditor's report is on page 68 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Rampt,
Aye.
Councilmember Sharstrom,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. Next up on new business, amending boundaries of TIF District Number 1-23 and the creation of tax increment financing District Number 1-26.
Mayor, members, you did have a hearing on this earlier. Mike is here from David Drown and Associates. If you have any additional questions, I would say that the information starts on page 69 with some correspondence from Shannon Sweeney. Again, I'm happy to answer, and I know Mike is, any questions that you might have about this. Again, there are two actions as a part of this. The first is to amend the current TIF district in that area, really changing the map. And then the second is to put in place District 1-26. One thing that we will mention is all the appropriate jurisdictions are informed of this and have the opportunity to comment on all of those things, which you see as a normal course of the business under the statute. And so we've received no commentary from the county or the school district or Region 9, who's a taxing jurisdiction in this area as well too. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, but that first resolution is really amending the current district, and the second resolution is putting the new District 1-26 in place.
Brad.
So Todd, can you clarify, we oftentimes I hear people say, well, why are we giving away this tax money? And can you clarify, for a TIF district, the only thing that is going back to the developer is any growth in the tax revenue. Anything, say we're getting already $1,000 a year on it, that $1,000 a year is still gonna go to the county, city, school district, correct?
That's correct.
And so it really is just more of a tax neutral move for the next 12 to 14, or in this case, 12 years.
Yes, that's correct. And we've used a number of examples for this, and certainly if anyone has questions, they can give us a call. I would also mention, or in addition, you've had decertification of districts. And so if these districts, because of growth or excess estimated market value, there are a number of reasons why they could pay in more. Those get distributed at the end to the appropriate jurisdiction if there is an overage as well. So yeah, from my perspective, it is tax neutral. It meets the but-for test, but for you providing assistance, this project wouldn't go forward, and then you wouldn't have these new tax revenues that would come into the community.
And then also in the case of this being a housing project, well, or even if it was a business, the city still collects the utility revenue on it, so it's still a growth in our enterprise funds that goes directly into the cities.
You bet, that's exactly true. Not to mention all the other things like additional people buying gas or hamburgers or water heaters or whatever it is, they're doing all of those things as well.
Thank you.
Carrie.
I would say that if
you were to bring back State of the City, Todd, TIF would be a great topic, just because I am hearing a lot more chatter about TIF and questions about what does that mean, and just understanding how the city uses it as a tool to spur development and even could use it to, redevelop blighted areas is really the purpose of it.
I appreciate that, and I can certainly do another State of the City. If you look back far enough on YouTube, there's a fancy one where I use salt and pepper to explain how tax increment districts works.
Time for a
And-
repost.
well, I appreciate that, so we can do something related to that. So, and it is. I don't want to say this is overly complicated, but these are important issues, and we want to make sure that people understand and we can articulate it clearly and accurately. Yeah, thank you.
The only other thing I'll point out is, I can't speak on behalf of the school board or the school district, but we do meet on a regular basis with the school board, and TIF is always something that comes up in those conversations, and I've never left those conversations feeling like there were grave concerns or any reasons that we should not pursue TIF districts based on school board concerns. Again, I can't speak for them. If you're a resident watching this online, reach out to your school board members. Do you have something to add? Can you come to the microphone?
Mike, if you would.
I apologize for inserting myself into this discussion.
That's quite all
The
right.
questions that you raised were good ones. I just wanted to point out that from the narrow perspective of the city, it's a revenue neutral situation. You've talked about some other ways that the local economy benefits, but one thing that's a direct tax benefit right away is that most schools in Minnesota have an operating referendum that's a market value based tax. We do not get to touch that as part of a TIF district. So the school will benefit day one in terms of their operating market value referendum tax. And then I would also point out, because it's a housing project, just remind everybody that a school district is probably more interested in new kids in the school district than they are in the real estate taxes of the building, because of the state aid based on per pupil population. So I just want to say the school's going to come out a winner day one on that project. So
Thank you, very helpful.
you bet.
And I can share from, obviously my day job is working within the district. It's a pretty open conversation that the need for students coming into the district directly impacts our funding source as a district. So any housing we're building is going to be helping them.
Any further discussion on this matter? Hearing nothing further, our first resolution amending the boundaries of tax increment financing district number 1-23 is on page 114 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Sharpstown?
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos?
Aye.
Mayor Noel?
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson?
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis?
Aye.
Councilmember Ramp?
Aye.
The resolution is approved. If there's any further discussion before we do our next resolution, yeah.
Could you go back to the map, please, Todd?
Yeah.
83, page 83. The area in crosshatch there includes the entire outlot, the entire parcel up there, which we just did the preliminary plat on. Are there any dollars from this TIF district that'll go into those other two lots that are not the housing or the apartment area? Because the apartment is just the southern part of that crosshatch lot, correct?
Yes, that is correct. So if there was additional development on that northern parcel, then that would provide additional increments.
But as it's proposed right now, there's no housing in the northern portion.
That's correct.
So this TIF would not be used to subsidize or to enhance those projects. It's just for housing. It wouldn't deal with the other uses that were out there.
Correct. It does allow us to provide resources for additional infrastructure that might be necessary. So in our minds, that's sidewalk, trail, those types of things that would occur within this area.
Okay, thank you. That's my question. Thank you, Mayor.
Question. Any further questions? Hearing nothing further, the resolution approving the establishment of tax increment financing district number 1-26 within municipal development district number 1, and the adoption of the tax increment financing plan relating thereto appears on pages 115 through 118 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the vote, please.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis,
Aye.
Councilmember Ramp,
Aye.
Councilmember Sharstrom.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. Next up, Klein Street improvements.
Members, this is included in your packet. We did have a hearing earlier on this. The documentation starts on approximately 118, 119, give or take just a little bit. You'll see some information that's included in here from Shannon from David Drown and Associates. The information that he includes a discussion about Klein Street and Cullen Street projects because they are substantially similar in nature, although we have separate actions for all of these. The first one relates to Klein Street, and you're required to have a hearing. Again, your bond counsel has asked this hearing occurs. You already occur, and you have some findings related to that we ask that you document as a part of the resolution, which is included on on page 120. This then provides all the necessary requirements to move forward with this project as a part of the assessment with the Department of Transportation and the approval of the infrastructure, which includes water, wastewater, stormwater, roadway, curb and gutter. All that has been approved previously by the council.
Questions for Todd?
We have awarded this contract already then?
Yeah, and so the suggestion here from your bond counsel is that there have been recent court cases that have eroded some of this issue, so this is more of a belt and suspenders approach to this. And so she's not concerned about that, but we're gonna make sure that we cover this with belt and suspenders. And so that's the ordering of the improvement here.
So the only improvement, the only assessment would be half to the DOT, the other half would be to the city because of the other.
That's
landowners?
correct.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Hearing nothing further, the resolution ordering the 2024 Cullen Street improvements is on page 121 of the wait, did I go ahead? I did go ahead.
No.
The resolution ordering 2024 Klein Street extension improvements is on page 120 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Mayor Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis,
Aye.
Councilmember Ramp,
Aye.
Councilmember Sharstrom,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. Now, the Cullen Street improvements that I was so excited to
As are
do.
we. As are
Yes.
we. So the first item here, Madam Mayor, is that you did have a hearing earlier in your meeting, which is required as a part of 429. And so this is a resolution ordering the improvements. This does not make the improvements take place. However, it is true that following this, we have a recommendation and resolution providing approval of the contract for this bid project. And so we can talk a little bit more when we get to that point. And Pete and I have a memo included in your packet about that. But this is the appropriate action to continue to move forward at this stage of the process.
Alrighty, questions for Todd? There.
We are the only landowner who are putting assessments on as a city, correct?
We are the only landowner currently. You have a development agreement that provides for transfer of property and acceptance of the assessments. And so that is in place currently.
But there's no other landowner assessed on here except for the
That is
city.
correct.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Hearing nothing further, the resolution ordering 2024 Cullen Street improvements is on page 121 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis,
Aye.
Councilmember Ramp,
Aye.
Councilmember Sharstrom,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Noel.
Aye. The resolution is approved. Last item of new business tonight.
Thank you, Mike, for being with us.
Thank you. 2024 Cullen Street improvements, Esler Drive to north of Clark Street bid award. And Pete's here to talk to us about that.
Pete's here to talk about the bid process, and then I have a few things that I'll mention as well. Pete?
Madam Mayor and City Council, we're here tonight to ask you to authorize Northwest Asphalt of Shakopee to be awarded the bid in the amount of $1,989,525. We did receive 6 bids underneath the engineer's estimate, and it's a very competitive market at this time. So again, we got very fortunate, and we've got a good contractor online. This would be an improvement between Esler Street and Traverse Green and 500 feet north of Clark Street. It is the residential development that Ben and Todd and myself have been working with you on going forward. We were happy that we received 10 bids. The low bid is approximately $300,000 underneath our engineer's estimate, which is what we use to discuss with you on our pricing of our lots. And so with that, we'd ask that you approve the resolution on page 124. Our contractor is very interested in starting this project here within the next few weeks and getting some dirt work done and dirt work moved before fall.
So Pete, we'd anticipate this project really will be accomplished in 2 phases with winter kind of in the middle. Can you explain that a little bit?
So we did have, during the course of this project, our consulting engineer did design it so that the contractor could start the work and could stop, and then over the winter, they get the utilities installed, they'll put the street curb and gutter in, sidewalk, driveway approaches, again, whatever we need here at this process. Next spring. And so we anticipate that you'll have a June, July subdivision where contractors are building homes.
So Mayor and members, if I can articulate a couple of things that happen next in process should you approve this. So certainly we sign all the documents and they start working all those things, but as a part of this process yet this fall, we will be coming back to you with the final analysis on the bids, the engineering fees, those types of things, and you'll be establishing prices on those lots. Block 1, lot 1 is this price. Block 1, lot 2 is this price. And so that will be coming forward to you. As you're aware, and we've talked about this numerous times since this came in under our estimates, that means the cost of those lots are under the estimates that you've seen previously. But there's still a little bit of work to do related to that. And we have you set those prices so that we can transfer those properties if there's a sale efficiently, effectively, and moving forward. Again, remember, you also have a development agreement with Miller Homes for approximately 25, 26 of these lots. And so you have an agreement in place where they put some money down, where they are agreeing to buy lots, and that they will pay you for those lots when they are sold to the final user. So when a homeowner comes in place. As you know, we've talked about this a lot. There are a number of intricacies to this. It's part of my job to say, this is not a slam dunk. This is an outside of the box idea that you've moved forward, and we've been working on for now almost 4 years to move additional residential development forward on lots that are in what we would consider mid to upper end of the marketplace. So all of these lots will be more than 10,000 square feet. This is not a slam dunk. It's my job to tell you that it's not a slam dunk. But we do feel we're in the right position. The bids have come in better than we had expected. This, we believe, will continue to stimulate additional growth, not only within the economy, but within the school district, and meet needs that we see and have identified very clearly within the marketplace. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that, and I'm happy to answer questions about that and what data we look at. But this is the manifestation of that. And once you move forward and sign a contract with the contractor, you are building. There will be water, sewer, roads, curb and gutter, sidewalks, all of those kind of things as a part of this. So this is kind of that where we are now jumping forward. Everything else has been hypothetical, has been just thinking about it, measuring it. This is moving this project forward.
Ben?
Pete, have we worked with Northwest Asphalt before?
They haven't worked in the city here, but we do have a couple of employees that have worked with them in other cities.
Okay. No issues, no...
We checked resources, and both our consulting engineer and our staff feel comfortable working with them.
Okay.
I was surprised to see 10 bids, not unpleasantly surprised, but yeah, it was a longer list than we usually see. Brett?
So Todd, can you clarify, I wasn't sure, is this a slam dunk that people are gonna build on here?
Maybe I said it once too often, but it's important. This,
I appreciate your
yeah,
honesty with
this is an outside the box. I'll tell you that I've gotten dozens of contacts from other communities that are asking, how do you do this? How are you doing this? This is an outside of the box solution to what we really have identified as a marketplace challenge with lots that are over 10,000 square feet, where people are building $300,000 to $400,000 to $500,000 homes on them.
And all kidding aside, I think staff has done an excellent job over the last couple of years pulling this together. Obviously, they were working with another community organization that fell out, but then they found another partner in Miller Homes to give us some assurance that we might be able to, that we should be able to get some homes started in building here. And on top of that, we're already seeing Traverse Green itself almost fill up. So
Yep.
I commend staff for all the work they've done on this. I mean, coming in 300,000 under estimate is, I think I estimated on the 40, it should average about $7,100 a lot less compared to what the engineer's estimate was. So.
Yeah, I would say that to make the debt service move, which you've already seen and examined as a part of workshop, we really anticipate that we've got to have about 3.5-ish homes a year, and that seems like not a slam dunk, but doable.
And one other thing to note, I think I had asked you about this, or Ben Baker. This is not a TIF district, correct?
That is correct. This
So-
is not, we are not using TIF resources for this. The assessments, the cost of this infrastructure is being paid by the sale of the lots and homes that would be built on these parcels.
So any new homes that are built will automatically just go straight into the regular tax rolls.
Daryl.
Based on our housing study that we just approved a couple meetings ago, there, if my recollection is correct, we have less than 10 buildable lots in town that are for sale.
Yeah, we believe that of that number, only 3 or 4 are more than 10,000 square feet, Daryl.
And this property has been available for development for at least the past 10 years that you've worked trying to get this developed privately, but those efforts never came to fruition, correct?
Yes, that's true.
Thank you.
Additional questions, comments? All right, hearing nothing further, the resolution awarding bid for 2024 Cullen Street improvements, Essler Drive to north of Clark Street is on page 124 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Pettis,
Aye.
Councilmember Ram,
Aye.
Councilmember Sharstrom,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. Thank you very much, Pete. Moving on to reports, I don't have anything to report at this time. We'll move on to reports of the council members. Brad?
Well, I had the opportunity Thursday night to go to another meeting, a dinner hosted by Climate Smart Municipalities. It was up at the U. Similar to last year, it was meeting with business people and government representatives from North Rhine-Westphalia state in Germany. As they describe themselves, they're kind of the California of Germany from a production and population perspective. They have a number of particularly green energy options and green energy businesses. I am focusing some on solar and but really working towards biodigesters, and hydrogen hydrogen power for electrical generation is becoming a larger aspect of their business development. I was able to meet other community representatives around from around Minnesota. There was an intern in the water department at New Ulm that might be doing a tour of our own water department because of how advanced ours is compared to theirs. It's meetings like these, being able to come back and then also talk to our utilities about some of the things going on and some of the connections that are made, I think are really integral, and I think it's very important that we continue to do these going forward. So.
Thanks. Kara, I wasn't sure if you wanted to say anything about the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities meeting that happened last Thursday?
Yeah. Do Would you like to share?
Yeah, I was there as well. The coalition was doing some regional meetings, and so they came down to Mankato. So it was a great chance to meet with their staff, of course, to meet with other local elected officials and city staff. We talked about a lot of things the last session. We talked about our hospital and challenges that are happening across the state with EMS, and it was just a really good meeting. I don't know if there's anything else. We talked about housing a lot, as usual.
Yeah, I think what was nice about the regional meeting is that there were cities that don't typically have folks that go to the regular conferences, and so we saw a lot of different people that were new faces and got to hear from them. And so I know from a regional perspective, we have a lot of the same concerns. I mean, in our area, we were impacted by flooding, for instance, and so I think it's more efficient for the coalition to do regional meetings than individual meetings. I know that they still want to keep doing that with cities, but this was a good opportunity. And they've had some really good regional meetings across the state where they have, EMS is one issue that kind of came out of a regional meeting. And of course, there was policy developed that spurred from that. So there's some positive things about bringing people together in this way.
And I guess I left that meeting feeling it was just a good reminder of how important the work we do with our legislators to let them know what our priorities are as a city, to advocate for the city, to advocate for our residents, and our priorities is really something that we've been doing, I think, in the last few years. It really helps that we've got council members who are involved, and just to keep that up, because we have the opportunity to advocate for our city, and it's important. Any other reports from council members? We'll move on. Report of the city administrator.
So, Madam Mayor, I'd ask Pete to come forward. I'm hoping that he can give two reports, a quick one on safe routes to school. We've had a lot of discussion about that in the past, and as you know, we've been in a little bit of a holding pattern moving that forward, so I'd ask Pete to talk about that first.
Sure. Safe routes to school. We have successfully completed the Require archaeological study survey that we did. It really was an exploration along Church Street where the old railroad was located. We did not find anything of historical significance, so our plan now would be to communicate that to SHPO and the other state agencies to get the green light to proceed with the project. Our plan then would remain to take bids on Thursday, and we will do an analysis of those and bring those back in September for council action.
And
You've already received the bids, and
we have not received the bids. We will this Thursday, August 29th.
we would anticipate that potentially some construction happens this fall. It depends on the contract and their schedule, but it could be in the spring as well.
Right, based on the federal funding that we have, we need to have a little bit of the work started this fall.
Yeah. And if people have questions about that, there's some great information on our website about where it is and all those types of things, and a really great cooperative and collaborative effort with the school district in making that. This is a project that is at least 5 or 6 years in the making and going forward. So, Pete, I'd like you to talk about electric program just for a little bit.
Sure.
And if I can make my computer work out, we want to point this out to folks, and then I have one last one after that, Madam Mayor.
Sure. As council has directed, at the beginning of the year, we started working on an electric incentive program. We do have 2 of them active right now on our website. It's the electric water heater incentive. So basically, if you put an electric water heater in, you'll be eligible to receive a $250 one-time rebate. That's for the purchase and installation of an approved electric water heater. And there's some criteria on our website that you can look at and review. There is an application, fill that out, and then somebody would come and take a look at that. Also then, we have an electric garage heater incentive, basically for people that have garage that they would like to heat up during the wintertime a little bit. you're eligible to receive a $250 one-time rebate again from the city for that. We do have 3 electric heaters that we will authorize the rebate for. We will have those in our possession, so the homeowner purchases those from the city. Then our electric superintendent will come out and make sure everything's hooked up right, and then that $250 would be accredited to your bill. We are working on 2 other projects that are coming up. The new home incentive, and that is if you install an electric stove, an electric water heater, and electric clothes dryer, you're eligible for a $500 one-time rebate and a new $7,500 or 7,500 watt garage heater at no cost. And so there's some criteria. Again, your air conditioner and water heater then at that time needs to be hooked up to load management so that we can manage that load again. And the garage heater must be installed, and the appliances should be Energy Star efficiency specification. The remaining one that we're excited about is the EV charger incentive. Again, anybody that puts an EV charger at their place could get a rebate of up to $250. If you work with our staff there to get a vehicle charger in there, we put it on a separate meter and a time of use metering. So this is a little different. Right now we use a flat rate. You'd go to time of use metering. So if you use it during peak conditions, it costs a little more. If you use it during other times, you'd pay less. And so we're trying to shift how the customer uses that power. It helps us out with grid situations and get some energy efficient installations.
Our goal is to promote this going forward, and so you'll see more and more information starting to come out as a part of all of these. Madam Mayor, I think Brad maybe had.
I'm just gonna say, I'm really excited to see these, and yeah, commend you and your staff for what you've been able to pull together. Like one of the things I talked about in the meeting I went to or the dinner I went to last week with the Climate Smart Municipalities is it's essentially moving towards moving away from fossil fuels, the decarbonization, and one of the ways to do it is to encourage electrification along these lines. And the other thing with encouraging electrification is we're the utility, so it builds our customer base. So
Our portfolio of renewable energy related to electric continues to grow substantially, and so it's something we should be happy about. Yeah. Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank you, Pete.
Madam Mayor, the last one that I have, if I can make this work out, there we go, is I just wanted to provide, today was something that occurs almost every year as a part of my work here in St. Peter. The election season is upon us. And so that means that political signs start to show up in boulevards and all over places. And so there'll be some more information coming out in the hot sheet, but we wanted to give people just a little bit of additional understanding related to that signage. So if you have a political sign that you're putting out, generally the rules are in St. Peter that you should put that sign on the house side of your sidewalk. Because that's on private property where next to the curb line is right of way and owned by the community at large. What happens if you don't have a sidewalk? Then generally we say we'd love for you to stay at least 10 feet in back of the curb, at least 10 feet in back of the curb with that signage. And there are special rules related to signs on corners for vision, for stop signs, for people turning, being able to see oncoming traffic and pedestrians and those types of things. So I wanted to get that out there. There'll be some more information coming in the hot sheet. We've already seen some of these signs out, and again, today was one of those days where we got our first concern about signs not being in the right place. I will mention that most of the campaign folks, the folks that are putting out these signs, are really gracious and cooperative, and if we give them a call or send them a note, more often than not, within a couple of days, they move them to the proper location. Sometimes folks are doing things as simple as, well, the sign is in my yard here, and I move it here to mow, and then I just don't move it back, and now it's in the wrong spot. And so people have been very gracious in working with us. I would also mention that for folks that might be running for office in the future, that there is a state statute that says those signs have to be removed within 10 days following the election. So again, behind or on the house side of the sidewalk, or if there's not a sidewalk, 10 feet back from the curb. Call us if you have questions about corners, and then those signs have to be put away 10 days after the election in November. So those are kind of the big 4 or 5 big rules that we have in place. And again, more information to follow. Madam Mayor, that's all I have for you for tonight.
All right. If there's nothing further, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Yes.